They say that a hero is only as good as his villain, and boy oh boy, does this raccoon have many, many villains. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel guys, it's your boy Sly Lancy, and for today's video guys, we will be ranking every single Sly Cooper villain from worst to best. Now, back in 2022, right around the time where I decided to take YouTube a bit more seriously as a career, this is when I decided, you know what, let me put some videos out about stuff that I want to talk about. And Sly Cooper just so happened to be the very first thing I wanted to talk about. As I stated in those earlier videos, Sly Cooper has some of the most maniacal, conniving, and most backstabbing villains in the entire franchise, and then he has villains that are just not that whatsoever. Now, going into this video, we're going to be doing that same exact video, but we're going to combine the two videos together into one and re-rank a lot of the placements while also adding Dimitri and Panda King to the list, yes really, so that we can decide once and for all who is the greatest Sly Cooper villains and where do they place. So for this video, we're omitting the Panda King Dimitri rule, and we're going to keep all the other rules instead, because I feel like they apply to this video as well. So yes, I'm combining Black Baron and the Black Knight into one villain because it's the same person, and we'll talk about that person when we get into the video. But yeah, aside from that, everything else applies. So if you guys are ready, I'm ready too. Let's get into it. Every Sly Cooper villain ranked from worst to best. Number 22. The Mask of Dark Earth from Sly 3. Need I say more about this entry? I think every Sly Cooper fan basically anticipated the Mask of Dark Earth being the worst villain still after all these years. Cause there's no point to the mask. It's not a cool concept at all because they made it so basic. Like I said in the other video that I released back 3 years ago, I basically said if this mask had like Venom tendencies where it tries to really forcefully take control of the host, then I think it'd be a much cooler concept on paper, but it just didn't work the way I think it should have. And while I can appreciate the theory of the guru wearing this mask which corrupted him so much that he decided to get rid of it forcefully for good, everything else about this villain just does not work for me, in terms of the story and in terms of the boss fight as well. Number 21. Miss Deciful from Sly 4. Once an inspiring music student who had dreams of making it big in the music industry one day, Miss Deciful would work concerts as a little kid. However, people very much hated her music, and because of her explosive temper, she ended up having a huge temper tantrum, which somehow, don't ask how, but somehow got a trumpet stuck up her nose during her temper tantrum. And then when she tried to get it out by blowing it out, it ended up blowing this like energy that makes everybody around her hypnotized to her. And once she figured out the ability to mind control people the way she could, she walked down a path of evil and started looting everybody of their money and making people follow her for her music dreams. She would later down the line run into Le Paradox, and then the two would help each other in achieving their goals and passion. Le Paradox's dream being the greatest thief on the planet while also erasing Sly from history, and Miss Deciful obviously achieving, her status as a music symbol. Now, I've said this about Miss Deciful before and I'll say it again, but the very moment I saw her the first time, I knew she was just gonna be one of the worst Sly Cooper villains because the story was just so basic and so just unnecessarily boring. She basically felt like a very much watered down version of Don Octavio, who we will be talking about eventually on this list. But yeah, that's how I felt with Miss Deciful when I saw her. Now, for Miss Deciful's placement, as far as I'm concerned, she's nowhere near as bad or as forgettable as the Mask of Dark Earth. But she's just very forgettable as one of the anthropomorphic characters in this series. And also add to the fact that at the very end of her story too, she decides to change her ways and become good and teach prisoners how to play music so that when they get out of jail, they don't have to fall down that same path again. It basically tells you all you need to know about her. She acts more as an inconvenience rather than an actual villain. Number 20. The Grizz from Sly 4. I ain't gonna lie, it's the stereotypes that kill this character for me. It really is just the stereotypes. Other than that, Nah, I think even without the stereotypes, I still wouldn't like this character as much. Also, how do we go from having actual bears that are trying to kill us in Sly 2 to now we have anthropomorphic bears in Sly 4? How does that work? But anyway, let's not stray too far away from topic here. So the reasons for this character is being as low as it is like I said earlier, he's just too much. He feeds too much into the rapper stereotype, with him acting like he's all big and bad and that no one can mess with him type of mentality, but then deep down he's actually a real softie. Like, I hate that stereotype so much. But I have to give credit where credit's due, is that as a villain, the art laundering thing is actually very, very intelligent, where, you know, he puts pieces of artwork in the ground from ancient history and then it's going to travel back into the future just to dig it up and sell it for a fortune. That is actually very, very creative as a villain. Everything else about him I could legitimately just do without. The ice skating boss fight, I don't care for. The whole rapper stick, I really don't care for. His very loud and often brash personality, I really don't care for. And I've said this before about the Grizz, and I'll say it again, is that he feels like a very, very oversaturated version of Dimitri. And while I'm going to get to Dimitri in a second because he is in this video, what I will say about Dimitri is that while yes, he's very out there as a personality, he still kept things under wax and still had a much more better scheme as a villain than what the Grizz did. And also, he runs a nightclub. The Grizz can't say that. Number 19. Ms. Ruby from Sly 1. This mysterious mystic from the deep in the Haitian jungle is very, very tricky to figure out. Being shunned by the world as a kid growing up because of how creepy she was and her interest in the mystic and the voodoo spells, she ended up using this to get back at the world for shunning her as a kid. Her voodoo powers earned her a spot in the Fetish Five as the chief mystic of the group, having been able to know how to break the laws of both man and nature. Now, as a kid growing up, I was definitely very much scared of Miss Ruby growing up. But as I gotten older, I just kind of feel like she has a specific issue with her that another villain that I'm about to talk about in a sec has, is that the fact that she only has one appearance in the entire series, aside from the mini comic series and Sly issue comic number 2. But yeah, aside from that, this is just her only appearance. And even then, I still think she's just very generic of a villain. And like, I can appreciate the story that they were trying to go over her, but I just didn't feel too much emotion when dealing with her the older I got. It also doesn't help with the fact that her area is one of the more bland areas in my personal opinion, along with also having one of the worst boss fights in the entire series. But she definitely is creepy, and she definitely has her moments of standing out as a villain. Although definitely one of the lesser good villains, thanks to a lack of connection to Sly personally, and also the fact that her whole chapter is bland in my opinion. I will say this though, she's definitely much better than the Grizz, and she's definitely way better than Miss Decibel by a landslide. Number 18. Sir Raleigh the Frog from Sly 1. As I stated before in the first video, and I'll say it again, I have a very, very soft spot for Sir Raleigh the Frog, because he was the very first villain in the entire franchise that we ever had to face. Although apparently that was supposed to be Panda King's distinction after reading up on some articles recently. But not to stray too far away off topic here, back to Sir Raleigh the Frog. Sir Raleigh the Frog, I like him, but my likeness for him can only go but so far, because as a villain, much like Ms. Ruby, he's really not that menacing of a villain like that. At least, the older you get, you understand, you know, what the difference is between a scary, menacing, conniving villain and a villain that's just more of an inconvenience more than anything else. Sir Raleigh was definitely more of an inconvenience as a villain. Although I will say this, plundering ships and forcing his workers to work overtime 24/7 is definitely very, very evil. The backstory, however, leaves a lot to be desired. However, given the current state of the world today, the backstory actually aligns perfectly with what's been happening in the world recently. A rich billionaire growing bored of his life, so he does evil acts just to satisfy his boredom, basically. And while the boss fight leaves a lot to be desired for Sir Raleigh the Frog, I will say this is that the Isle of Wrath is easily one of my favorite areas to play in the entire Sly Cooper franchise. Number 17. El Jefe from Sly 4. So how is it that a character I like a lot less than Sir Raleigh the Frog end up much higher on this list? Well, basically just because he's much more of a badass than Sir Raleigh is. But that's not me saying he's a complete badass, because I personally think he's just a wannabe tough guy who runs away from fights a lot while also having other people do his dirty work for him. And I know in previous videos people have disagreed with me on that segment with El Jefe, but this is just how I personally feel about him. However, he's saved by the area that he's working in. He's also saved with the fact that he's the very first villain in the first ever Sly Cooper game in almost like a decade. So I'm definitely having some leniency with that. And he's the first villain on this list that I can actually say he feels like an actual villain, not just an inconvenience. Number 16. Le Paradox from Sly 4. I should give this guy more leeway because he is the main villain of Sly 4, but even then, no matter how many times I replay Sly 4 and try to give this guy the benefit of the doubt, I just can't bring myself to put him higher than even some of the other villains on this list that weren't the main villains of the entire game. And I know some of you are probably wondering, how can a main villain be this low on this villains list? Well, it really feels like he's just a wannabe Clockwork. That's all I get with Le Paradox. The only difference between the two, which should be very obvious to people, is that Le Paradox is doing it out of pure spite and jealousy, as to where Clockwork is legitimately doing it out of pure hatred and bloodlust. Le Paradox growing up had been kind of the joke of the entire black market industry because his father was a master thief, supposedly, but then got outplayed by Sly's father, Connor, and he ended up in jail instead of Connor did for a heist that he should have pulled instead of Connor. This led to a lifelong jealousy from Le Paradox, who was hoping to erase Sly's family from history completely. Doing the same exact things that El Jefe would be doing, as to where getting other people to do his dirty work for him and then he takes all the credit in the end afterwards. There's another villain in this entire franchise aside from him and El Jefe that does the same exact thing, but the fact that he masterminded the entire plan himself and had much more evil intentions with it than these two had combined makes him a much better villain in my opinion, but we'll talk about him when we get to him. But as of right now, with Le Paradox, I really just don't see the mesh with Le Paradox as a villain. Number 15. Toothpick from Sly 4. Now we're starting to get into the territory of villains that I actually like or really like or love. Toothpick as a villain, I really like his character in Sly 4, and even more so every time I replay the games now. Out of all the Sly 4 villains, he stands out as one of the most creative and most personality driven characters in there. He keeps his personality high but not overly high, and he keeps his goals at hand very focused and centric. I also love the fact that as a kid, apparently, he really wanted to be a cowboy growing up, and because he became a gangster in life and then he met with the Le Paradox, that connection with Le Paradox helped him become an actual cowboy later on in life. So I always found that part a bit heartwarming, even if his intentions were to be very evil. Also, the master plan that he had in which he was going to frame Tennessee Kid for gold that he stole, that Kid was actually trying to steal first, was actually also very genius, because it puts him in a position to put the gold somewhere special, and then when he digs it up, he'll be beyond a multi-millionaire. It's practically the same plan as the Grizz, though his plan may be just worth a bit more money. Toothpick's plan puts him relatively higher on this list than most of the other Sly 4 villains, and also the fact that his area is also one of the best in the entire franchise. Also the fact that he managed to kidnap Carmelita and the Cooper gang. As supposedly just a one-time villain in this franchise, he definitely left a mark and impact. And even though unfortunately for him, he would end up getting captured and charged for stealing the gold instead of Tennessee Kid, and then he would end up getting killed by a train that came by on the railroad that he never heard because he went deaf after the train whistles blew his ears out. He is without a doubt arguably the best Sly 4 villain in the entire game. There may be another Sly 4 villain that people would refer to more than him, but he's definitely one of the best, if not the best. Number 14. Captain LaFouille from Sly 3. This pirate is very menacing. Very menacing. I know some people will be like, why would a pirate be relatively high on a villains list? But this guy really is very mentally disturbed. As Bentley put it, practically pirates are killers. This guy, LaFouille, is one of the smartest men to ever sail the seven seas, at least according to what everybody that he's ever came across with said. He's plundered many ships, he's killed many men, is willing to kill a woman over stolen treasure. Yes, really. He really has no remorse for any of his sins that he's committed throughout history, and it's very much apparent even in death, pridefully shouting out that he will always be the smartest man to sail the seven seas while being eaten alive by sharks. It's a good thing that his evilness places him this high on the list, because everything else about him pretty much is very stagnant at best. The area that he's in is one of the worst areas in the entire Sly franchise, in my opinion. I don't care for the chapter either. Also, the boss fight is literally just there. I could have easily put LaFouille a bit lower on this list, like low below Toothpick and La Paradox, especially now, the more I play the game now and the more I realize I may have overrated him in the previous video, but he still has a lot of evilness to him, so that's why I'm still willing to put him higher than even Toothpick. Number 13. Don Octavio from Sly 3. I am so mad I cannot place this dude any higher than number 13, but because of how much more menacing and evil the other villains are on this list, I have to put him in this list at number 13. And while some may argue that Don Octavio is legitimately the same exact character as Miss Decibel, the difference is that Don Octavio feels a whole lot more menacing as a villain, thanks to legitimately being the mob boss of the Italian Mafia. Also, he has a lot more personality, his singing is much better, and his reasonings for being evil in the first place is a lot more understanding than that of Miss Decibel's. A once beloved musician outed by the industry that created him is much more appealing as a story than a little kid throwing a temper tantrum because she didn't get her way. Don Octavio's story feels like something you would see in a Shakespearean writing. Someone who was once loved by the community and then shunned by the community because they found something they loved even more, and now he's willing to burn the bridge down just to feel that warmth and love again. Don Octavio has a list of very vile acts that he does while we see him. He completely pollutes the entire city with tar. He has his Italian Mafia gang posing as cops just so they can run the streets. He's willing to kill anybody that he deems as a threat to his plans, even if they were innocent in the entire operation itself, legitimately blowing up a building just because nobody would show up to his opera recital. Don really is mentally disturbed as a villain, and again, I had him higher on the top 10 list, but because I had to add two other villains on this list, and we're going to talk about them in a sec, he unfortunately has to place at number 13, but that's not because he's just an average villain. He's one of the best villains in the entire series. It's just the inconvenience of the situation that he's put in right now with this list. Number 12. The Panda King from Sly 1. Here we are, the first member from the excluded list in the previous video, Panda King. My man Panda King. So, as a villain in terms of evilness, he's actually relatively higher than what most people would probably give him credit for, because if you watch the story from Panda King, you would understand how very vindictive he actually really is, especially when he's crossed. It's only in his later years that he learns to have the wisdom to not let things get to him, and also I guess after the incident with almost losing his daughter to someone more vindictive than he was, who we're going to talk about later on this list, I think that definitely changed him for the better. And I'm very happy it did, because how he was in the first Sly game, you'd think that this man would not be redeemable at all. Panda King literally lit fireworks just to blow up mountains and then bury villages in ice cold snow, either freezing them to death or crushing them to death. And all this because, like most villain stories, he was made fun of as a kid for being poor and having shabby clothes. As a matter of fact, the more I think about it, the more upsetting it is that a lot of these villain arcs really was just because of how they were treated as children. Even some of the most evil men in the history of the world in real life, a lot of their story arcs and villain arcs was literally just because of how they were treated growing up. And it's absolutely amazing how a simple video game like this can tell a major life story and life lesson like that. But not to get too far off topic here, Panda King gets number 12 on this list because he helped aid Clockwork in killing Sly's father and was practically a madman himself. The wisdom that he gained later on in life, while also hoping that Sly would forgive him for his actions, while also forgiving Sly for ruining his life as well, it basically put Panda King lower on the list because it allowed him to grow as a character. He's definitely one of the most complex characters in the entire franchise, and if I did a video on the most complex characters in Sly Cooper history, he would definitely be in the top 5 somewhere, probably top 3. One of Sly's greatest enemies, but also one of his greatest allies. Number 11. Dimitri from Sly 2. Those 3 words right there forever etched Dimitri's name into Sly Cooper lore forever. Dimitri's popularity goes beyond just the Sly Cooper games as well. It even managed to reach its way into pop culture at certain points, even though some people will probably never fully admit it. Now, Dimitri as a villain, his evilness really isn't all that evil. He just more so plays a part in the scheme of things, but the personality that he has, along with the fact that he still is relatively smarter than most villains, really shows how much these people really love this guy. Other things that make Dimitri stand out as a villain that most people would not probably take into account is 1. He owns a nightclub. 2. He has a lot of back alley dealings. 3. He was an artist in his spare time but then ended up forging art just so he can make millions off of it. 4. He's practically a mob boss in the city of Paris. 5. He makes counterfeit money just so he can act like he's a billionaire. 6. His legendary music video. 7. His iconic outfit and look. 8. The fact that he's willing to sell illegal spice in the clubs just so he could continue making money while probably understanding what Arpeggio had at plan was much more bigger than he was. 9. He has one of the more entertaining boss fights. And 10. His dialogue. Man, oh man, do I love his dialogue. I am sure there are plenty more reasons as to why people love Dimitri, but this is just the 10 reasons that I've gathered and the reasons that I personally agree with as well. Because at surface level, Dimitri may not look as menacing as he looks, but if you actually really look into what he's doing, it's actually much more, you have to give the guy much more credit, being much more shadier than most other villains would anticipate. If the Sly series was much more grounded in realism rather than more science fiction, then Dimitri probably would have been easily the greatest villain in the entire franchise, just because of how much dirty work he's been doing. But, just like Panda King, he was excluded from the last list because he became an ally to the Cooper gang later. And that's another reason why he's not very high on this list as well, is because he changed his ways. Not necessarily changed his ways, but he just became more of a friendship with the Cooper gang, rather than just an enemy. But don't get it twisted, Dimitri's not only one of the most iconic Sly Cooper villains, he's one of the most iconic characters in this franchise. Number 10. Rajan from Sly 2. Here we are, the Spice Lord from Sly 2, the one who's been supplying the spice and causing a lot of our headaches from Sly 2. Rajan is without a doubt the heart and soul of the Claw Gang. It's funny because he has the Clockwork Heart as one of his clockwork parts. But anyway, yeah, there's no irony in this. This is legitimately a real statement because without the spice that's being supplied by Rajan, most of the plan that Arpeggio and the Claw Gang has does not work. Because as you'll see in the next chapter with Murray, anybody who's eaten the spice or is under the influence of the spice is definitely easily tempered and easily rattled by stuff, having a quick temper to explode on anything. Little did we know that that spice would lead to something much more hate-filled later on, but at the time we just took it as like, okay, Rajan's just another drug dealer that's just, you know, trying to make a quick buck. But again, that just plays into how much of the heart that Rajan really was to this group. And not to keep going on with the spice stuff, there's other aspects of Rajan that makes him just a good villain in general. His backstory is also pretty decent as well. His boss fight is actually pretty fun, and he's actually a very ferocious fighter. One thing holds him back though is that while I like the palace that he has, I'm not a fan of the jungle, just because of the lack of color that's in it. But again, it plays into the whole thieving aspect of Sly 2, so that's why I'm not going to be too bothered by it. Because overall, Rajan is definitely one of the best Sly Cooper villains. Is he better than some of the other Sly 2 villains on this list? I personally don't think so. I think there's a couple other villains that deserve much more mention than he does. Also, before we leave off here, a fun fact I want to throw in is that he was supposed to be the father of Neela, but they scrapped the idea at the last minute. Number 9. John Bassan from Sly 2. Here we are, guys. This is the one entry that I've been waiting the longest time to redeem myself of. In the first 2 videos on my channel where I talk about the villains list, I put John Bassan in the top 10 worst villains list, really in the low 10s version, because I said he's a very underrated villain. And every time I replay the Sly games or rewatch the stories online, I really feel like I underscored him a lot in that video. He definitely deserves to be in the top 10, and he could have easily gotten number 7 or number 6 on this list. It's actually funny because anytime I go back into the comments section of the worst Sly Cooper villains list, there's a reply under one of the comments that says, "It's funny, the Cooper gang underestimated John Bassan too, only to learn in hindsight that he was one of the greatest enemies." And I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. I think a lot of that underestimating from fans, myself included, had to do with the fact that he was really just like someone from the 1800s who probably didn't have the intelligence of this modern technology to really know or understand how these parts work. But when you actually sit down and actually look at what he's doing from underneath a microscope, it actually is very insane how intelligent and how much of an evil genius this guy really was. Imagine stealing 4 clockwork parts, being the first villain ever to see through the Cooper gang's disguises, being the first ever villain to raid the Cooper gang's hideout, and just still not considered one of the greatest enemies the Cooper gang's ever had to face. Whether we all want to admit it or not, John Bassan is legitimately General Sal in Sly 2. He literally did everything General Sal did in Sly 3. Now, General Sal may have done it quicker than John Bassan did, but it doesn't change the fact that John Bassan still was the first one to do what General Sal did to the Cooper gang. John Bassan is definitely one of the greatest Sly Cooper villains of all time. He placed number 9 on this list just because the other villains on this list are either much more memorable or just a tad bit more evil in their schemes. But I truly mean this when I say this, is that the fact that he is without a doubt one of the greatest Sly Cooper villains of all time, and I honestly believe he could have been number 8, 7, or 6 on this list if I really thought about it a bit longer. It just ultimately sucks that because of how loaded the villains roster is in Sly 2, he often gets lumped in the forgotten territory, because I truly think if people actually thought about it a bit more, he would be much higher on people's villains list. Number 8. Mugshot from Sly 1, Sly 3, the issue to Sly comic number 2, and promotional material for Sly 4. Mugshot is without a doubt one of the most iconic Sly Cooper villains of all time. Just his constant presence, just to be that annoying nuisance that the Cooper gang has to face every once in a while, it always brings a smile to my face every time I see him. From stealing pages of the Devious Raccoonist in the first game, to being a part of the airplane fights in the third game, the constant cameos and appearances that he be having in the games as well. Just, again, I cannot get enough of this guy. And firstly, let me just say, his area Mesa City is one of the best areas in the entire Sly Cooper franchise. That's number 1. Number 2, he has a really good boss fight in my personal opinion. Both of them, actually. And number 3, he just feels like that villain that just comes just to mess with Sly, or on occasion, Sly just wants to mess with him. Like, I get that kind of like dynamic, where it's just like the Tom and Jerry dynamic, where the two just want to mess with each other just to see who can piss off the other much more. I absolutely love dynamics like that in any type of media because it makes the characters much more entertaining while giving them a ton of depth as well. Every time Mugshot comes present in the Sly Cooper franchise, it feels like more of like that comic relief type of story that we need whenever Sly gets a bit too, heavy. But I always loved that about Mugshot. However, he only gets number 9 on this list just because his menacing nature diminishes with each appearance that he's in. He's not as evil as some of the other Sly Cooper villains, but he still has a bit of good charm to him that makes him just so endearing as one of Sly's most enduring villains. Number 7. The Contessa from Sly 2. I still hate spiders. I'm just putting it out there. I still hate spiders. I love Spider-Man, but I hate spiders. Okay, aside from that little quip there. Yes, Contessa. I don't need to go too much into Contessa because I think if for anybody who's played the game know how much, Contessa really was like the brains of the Claw Gang here. At least the second brains, I would say. Because this woman legitimately lied to everybody she came across. Same thing as another villain that I'll talk about later in this list. But again, you just cannot underestimate what Contessa did as a villain. Especially when you consider she betrayed what the badge stands for in Interpol. This is an old saying for characters like Contessa, and that old saying is, never trust a spider. Contessa's role in this game kind of slowly builds up over time when she works with Neela and Carmelita in trying to break down the Cooper Gang and the Claw Gang, and then when Neela turns in Carmelita, the Contessa's image slowly begins to unravel after that, and when Interpol finds out about this, they send Neela to declare war on the Contessa. All the while, Contessa is legitimately working on not only trying to erase the minds and memories of all the thieves, but steal their loot as well, while also trying to erase Carmelita's mind, just so Carmelita can take the fall for Contessa at Interpol. Let's also not forget that as a hypnotist, she is actually very well skilled with her hypnosis, and the fact that she has the clockwork eyes of all clockwork parts really hones in on that fact. It's a good thing that Bentley and Sly were much more mentally stronger than Murray was and were able to fend her off in a fight, because if this wasn't the case, then Contessa may have actually beat the Cooper Gang. Once she's arrested by Interpol and booked on charges for basically lying to them, the Cooper Gang are forced to flee the area and hide out for a while, along with Carmelita as well, because Contessa's corruption led to Neela getting a promotion at Interpol. And in her end credit cutscene, apparently she becomes a travel agent or a housing agent, but albeit a very crooked one. The Contessa is without a doubt one of the most creatively enduring Sly Cooper villains. She may not be as memorable as the other villains that's above her on this list, but she's without a doubt one of the most evil ones on this list. Number 6. The Black Baron, aka the Black Knight, aka Penelope, from Sly 3 and Sly 4. Guys, I'm sorry, I hate to be pessimistic, but I really think we're at a point where Sly 5 is just not happening at this point, regardless of how many fans want it, and believe me, I'm definitely in that group that wants a 5th Sly game. But just looking at it from a realistic standpoint, I just don't think there's any IP that wants to touch Sly. So, unfortunately, this is the reason why I decided to place Penelope this higher on the list. Because if she didn't betray the Cooper Gang in Sly 4, Sly 4 wouldn't have been as polarizing of a game as it was, and thus we probably would have had more Sly content in the future. So whether we like it or not, Penelope is one of the main reasons why we're probably not getting another Sly game, or any more Sly Cooper media. Having started out as an inconvenience of a villain in the first Sly game that she was in, Penelope just seemed more rather just like she just wanted to get the Cooper Gang out of the way of her plans. But after she was spotted and foiled of her plan, she decided that the Cooper Gang was worth her time, and she was going to join up and help the Cooper Gang with the Cooper Vault job. And during this time period where she's trying to help with the Cooper Vault job, she also gets into a romance with Bentley, which by far is one of the best romance stories in the entire franchise in my personal opinion, before Sly 4 came out, that was. But yeah, so yeah, she helps with the Cooper Gang, they manage to get the Cooper Vault job done, and everybody walks away with some money. But then, for whatever reason, in Sly 4, either because time changed her, or she was persuaded by the paradox, or maybe she was hypnotized. There's a lot of theories about why Penelope did what she did, but she betrays the Cooper Gang. She sells out the Cooper Gang by giving the parts to the time machine that Bentley was working on to the paradox, while also trying to perfect the time machine herself. Having believed that she and Bentley could be millionaires, but because she knew that Bentley would never be on board with the idea, she ended up taking matters into her own hands as well. What makes this even more saddening is the fact that when Bentley found out, it legitimately broke his heart to the point where he couldn't work on any more missions for the rest of the Mice of Mex chapter. Sly, Murray, Carmelita, and Sir Gareth all work on a plan to stop Penelope, and just when the plan's about to be foiled, that's when Bentley comes through to save the day, defeating Penelope and rescuing the gang. Now initially, when I first did Penelope's ranking in the old videos that I did, look up the first 2 videos on my channel, it was originally supposed to be that she was on the lower end of villains, probably around like the 11th or 12th spot, but she rises up 5 to 6 points here just because of how bleak the franchise is looking now, and that's the reason why I have to put her this higher on the list, because she practically almost single-handedly killed the franchise. And while the Paradox may have been the one to trap Sly in Egypt for the longest time, it was Penelope's actions that changed the course of history. And no amount of fan theories or fan stories will ever replace the impact that Penelope left on this franchise. And before we leave off Penelope, I just want to ask the question of whether or not if you think that Penelope is redeemable or irredeemable. Number 5. Arpeggio from Sly 2. There's a group of people out there who still refuse to give Arpeggio the credit that he deserves. I know he didn't have a lot of screen time, nor did he make an impact in the way that people think he did, but it's like a John Bassan issue, I think, because he really was the mastermind behind why Sly 2 was happening in the first place. The man masterminded the whole plan to get the Clockwork parts in the first place, then have his Claw Gang members basically do various things with the parts, and then he would have the Cooper Gang steal the parts back for him unknowingly, and then bring them back to him when John Bassan got a hold of them as well, while also having Neela do dirty work for him on the side to basically inform the Cooper Gang about the Clockwork parts, while also trying to steal the parts herself as well for Arpeggio. I'm telling you, this guy really orchestrated everything that happened in Sly 2. Some people will never understand that or fully understand how important that was to the story. Now, if the backstory for what Sly initially thought of Arpeggio was true, then he definitely would have been much lower on this list, because it really is pathetic if you made this suit just because you can't fly. But the fact that he was seeking immortality instead was something far greater and far more grandiose than even Sly and Bentley and Murray could have comprehended. Again, had Arpeggio managed to get inside the Clockwork suit himself and not Neela betraying him just so she could take the suit for herself, it really does paint him as a weakling that didn't deserve anything to begin with, and probably doesn't deserve to be in this top 5 at all. His masterfully executed plan would have gotten him top 3 on this list. It's just unfortunate that Neela killing him bumped him down to number 5 on this list for me. Number 4. Dr. M from Sly 3. Of all the entries on this entire list, I was fighting with number 4 and number 3's entry the hardest, because you could really put either one at the number 3 spot. But for number 4, I put Dr. M solely because I think that the idea of him being in Sly's father's gang was cool as a concept, but the execution just wasn't there entirely. I still firmly believe to this day, had they put this plot point that I talked about before, where they had like a little cutscene or something where it shows Dr. M and Clockwork meeting together to discuss the plans that they had, in which Clockwork gets to kill Sly's father and steals a Thievius Raccoonus in exchange for Clockwork telling Dr. M where the Cooper Vault was. I'd still think if they had added that plot point / theory into the game, it would have made Dr. Villain number 3 on this list for me. But even without that plot point or theory in the game, he's still a relatively evil person, basically killing anybody who defies him in order to get what he wants, and he doesn't care how many people he kills to get that done, even killing his own men to get a job done correctly. It definitely seems like out of all the people in the game that he respects the most, he definitely respects Bentley the most because he sees him as an intellectual equal as him, which is very true. The only difference is that Bentley and Sly's friendship was from childhood, as to where Dr. M and Sly's father's relationship felt more transactional than anything else. This is the one main reason why Bentley is able to still fight off Dr. M without problem, even though Bentley did have those reservations about his friendship with Sly. Again, little stuff like that, if they had played a little more with the story and added a bit more context to that story, I think Dr. M would have gotten number 3 on this list for me easily. Maybe even number 2. But instead, we're left to wonder what if. What also helps his case as a villain in this game is because one, his boss fight is so damn difficult, oh my goodness. On top of that, you could tell that even though he still hates Sly for everything, you could tell that he kind of admires Sly and Bentley's friendship, and you wish that's something that him and Connor had as well. Ultimately, however, because of how much time had passed and how much he'd wanted the Cooper Vault for so long, Dr. M is too far gone to be redeemed as a character, and he's willing to die in the Cooper Vault because he'd lusted over the Cooper fortune for so long. He was not going to give it up no matter what happened. Having been crushed to death by all the stalagmites that were in the cave, Sly and the gang managed to take the riches for themselves and live off happily ever after. At least for about 8 or 9 years. Dr. M's determination and persistence and status as a main villain in a Sly game earns him number 4 on this list, and most times whenever it comes to arch enemies for any hero or protagonist, I'm always inclined to put him in the top 3, but for this case, for whatever reason, I just can't put Dr. M higher than 4 on this list. Number 3. General Sal from Sly 3. Like I said with Dr. M in the previous entry, I was really conflicted on swapping these two placements on the list because of arch enemy status, but ultimately General Sal won out over Dr. M just because of how unruly evil this guy was. Like, the evil is deep-seated and deep-rooted in his blood. With Dr. M, you can maybe make the case that time hardened him over time, but General Sal was just pure evil from the day he was born, it feels like. Not even fully into the actual chapter of A Cold Alliance just yet. We're in basically the in-between chapter, The King of Fire, in which we realize how evil this guy was, kidnapping Panda King's daughter Jing King and forcing her to marry her, which is already red flag number 1. Red flag number 2, but not even before we even start a single mission in the cutscene, Bentley literally says he watched on surveillance watching this guy kick a puppy. Twice. Then in the mission Get a Job, we see him basically verbally abuse Jane King, which is red flag number 3. This particular moment doesn't even count as a red flag, just adding to his villainous arc in which he breaks into the Cooper Gang's hideout within the first few missions and steals the ThiefNet computer and compromising the entire plot and operation altogether, which leads to red flag number 4, in which he talks about how you don't need friends when you can have obedience and law. And then the 5th and probably most fatal red flag of all, he says this about Jing King.
But she doesn't want to marry you.
She's a woman. She doesn't know up from down.
Oh yeah, did I forget to tell you that later in the chapter he resurrects undead zombies to fight off any intruders in his area, and also summoning black magic dragons, while also willing to kidnap someone else because he felt his family had been dishonored, and his boastful nature really gets on your nerves after a while. This guy's just a definition of the word evil. Like, I never thought that I would hate his villain as much as I did General Sal, but I really do hate him. With characters like Neela, Dr. M, and even Clockwood, you could say you somewhat feel bad for them because of their victim of circumstance. General Sal has no redeemable qualities about him whatsoever. He truly is one of those purely evil people in fiction that I think really we need a lot more of in fiction, especially in the superhero genre, where we just need purely evil supervillains now and not just overly complex characters, because every once in a while you want a villain that you really want to hate against and really hope that they lose. General Sal did a great job at being that detestable, despicable villain, and he earns number 3 on this spot alone just for that. Number 2. Neela from Sly 2. I just cannot help but just feel like Neela deserved more to her character than what she got. Even though she is without a doubt the second greatest Sly Cooper villain in my opinion, I truly think there was more to her than just being a straight up villain. I still personally think that she should have been the one to help us at the end. I think what you do for the end of Sly 2 is that you have Arpeggio betray Neela, and Neela, angry Arpeggio, decides to help the Cooper gang stop Arpeggio in the Clockwork body, which leads to Carmelita helping everybody out. And then that's when, you know, maybe there's a little bit of a fight between Carmelita and Neela, but then afterwards, Neela is forgiven by the Cooper gang and Carmelita, and then they go about their lives working together. I don't know. That's just my personal theory on what should have happened. But anyway, Neela is without a doubt the biggest backstabber in the entire game. And I say this because even though you can make the case for Penelope or even Contessa, I truly think that because Neela came the closest to fruition with her plans, she is the greatest backstabber that Cooper Gang's ever had to deal with. Firstly, she betrays Interpol by working with Sly undercover without Interpol knowing about it. Then secondly, she betrays Carmelita, turning her in. Then she betrays the Contessa by turning her in. Then she betrays Arpeggio for basically because she wants the Clockwork parts for herself. She basically betrayed everybody in the game without care or thought about what the consequences would have been. And remember how I said earlier that Rajan was supposed to be Neela's father in this game? I think if they had stuck with that plot point, it would have made her betrayal sting even way more than what it would have. Because like, if she's willing to throw her own flesh and blood under the bus just so she can gain immortality, that really says a lot about her character. And it's funny because Penelope practically did the thing that I said before, in which she betrayed someone that she loved, or quote unquote loved, just so she could gain the upper edge in life. And that really says a lot about Penelope's character. But I think the difference between Penelope and Neela is that Neela was way more subtle about it and much more sneakier about it. And if ever given the opportunity, I truly think that if Neela and Penelope were to work together on something, Neela would betray her before Penelope betrayed her. It's crazy to think how much people are willing to sacrifice their own mortality just for power and money in the world. Again, we see stuff like this happen all the time, but in video games, you don't really think about that kind of stuff until you actually see it happen in real life. So this is what makes Neela such an interesting character. I truly think even more interesting because she really could have been like that mercenary for hire for Sly or Interpol. But unfortunately, she was a straight up villain in this game, and if ever given the opportunity, I truly think if they ever reboot the Sly Cooper franchise, Neela should be more so as an ally to the Cooper Gang, not an adversary. Because I think her being an ally to the Cooper Gang was way more interesting as a plot point than she was as a villain. Neela gets number 2 on this list for basically outsmarting everybody in the game. Well, almost everybody in the game. And she could have gotten number 1 also, but there's another villain who we all should know by now who's number 1 on this list that just has a bigger impact on Cooper's life more so than Neela did. But before we get to that, we'll do a recap and then we're going to get to the number 1 spot on our list. We are down to number 1, everyone. This should not be a surprise to anyone who's played this franchise. Number 1 villain in the Sly Cooper franchise is Clockwork from Sly 1 and Sly 2, with brief appearances in Sly 3 and Sly 4 as well. Cooper, you will never be rid of me. Those words will forever haunt Sly and the Cooper Gang for the rest of their lives. Even though Clockwork will never torment the Cooper lineage ever again, Sly, however, is forced to be remembered for everything that he's done to him and his family and his friends as well. His father's dead, Bentley's crippled, and Murray left the Cooper Gang for a while. And even though it wasn't Clockwork himself that was in control at the time in Sly 2, his body parts are still gonna be there to remind Cooper of what happened. In Sly 1, however, his boss fight is definitely one of the most complicated boss fights in the entire franchise, and also, it also shows you how very deadly this guy really is. He without a doubt definitely gave kids nightmares about him when he first came out onto the screen. That haunting robotic owl voice still haunts a lot of people to this very day, myself included. And that's why when it was revealed that the Clockwork parts were still intact in Sly 2, the Cooper Gang made it their mission to steal the Clockwork parts and destroy them for good because they knew the threat of Clockwork. But unfortunately, like I said earlier, the Clockwork parts managed to be put back together and almost brought Clockwork back to life completely, thanks to Arpeggio and Nelia. However, it's always good when you have a leader like Sly, a strong-minded individual like Bentley, and a tough-as-nails character like Murray to all work together to bring down Clockwork. Also, Carmelita coming in to help as well definitely adds a bit more bonus points as well. In other words, what I'm basically trying to say is that when it comes to someone like Clockwork, you need all the help you can get in stopping him, because Clockwork is legitimately almost godlike when he's in full form. The hate chip that was absorbing all the hate throughout the entire world was keen on doing that. Luckily, the gang was able to stop Clockwork and destroy the Clockwork parts for good, but like I said before, his spirit still lingers in Bentley's legs and Murray being mentally destroyed for a bit, and also Sly's father not being here as well. And I know for certain that if Sly 5 ever gets, the green light, that he would come back as the main villain in the 5th game before they probably end the series afterwards. I actually have a fan story that I made based off that theory if anybody wants to watch it. I'll put a link in the description or at the top of the video here. But yeah, Clockwork, he was always going to be number 1 on this list no matter how many times you spun it. You could argue that Neela was much more evil in her intentions. You could argue that General Sal may have been a tad bit more evil. But nobody will ever top Clockwork. Not Neela, not General Sal, not Dr. M, not none of them. And that concludes today's video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. What you guys think of my rankings, my re-rankings, the extra added people to the list? As always, comment down below what you believe and what your thoughts are. I'll try to read them as fast as I can and give my opinion on it. And as always, guys, thank you so much for all the love and support you've been showing. Definitely look for more Sly Cooper coming in the near future. I've just been taking a break from it just so I can refresh and get more invigorated with it. And also be wary of the new comic book series that I'm working on. I'll show a preview of it at the end of this video, and I'll definitely talk about it more in the future. But as always, guys, thank you so much, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want more content like this, because I do videos like this every single week. And I'll see you guys next time.